So today on the Stash, folks, we're going to do a bit of a retrospective, but it's more of a personal retrospective of the Metal Gear Solid franchise and my relationship with it. Of course, the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection Volume 1 is coming out soon. It might be out by the time you watch this video, but I wanted to take a trip down memory lane with Metal Gear Solid for me, talk about the highs of my fandom, the lows of my fandom, and pretty much everything in between. So I remember playing Metal Gear Solid 1 on the PlayStation 1, and it was a really good game. At the time, I didn't necessarily appreciate it quite as I would have, later on in life. But I was playing it with my friend Pecker Dupree. He had a copy of it. He had the PlayStation 1, so I'd only play it when I was over at his house. But I always really liked what I saw from the game and what the bits that I played of it when he would want to take a break or something. I definitely enjoyed it. I thought the character development was interesting. The plot of the game was interesting, but I never really got the full story because, like I said, I wasn't the one playing the game. Now, as life went on, I kind of fell out of touch with video games. Like, I owned a PlayStation 2. I had a couple of games for it, but I really wasn't playing games during that time. I was into other stuff, partying, drugs, all sorts of stuff. And I specifically remember one time we had a snowstorm in North Carolina, which a snowstorm means like 3 inches of snow, but like the whole town, the whole state just shut down. And so I was stuck at home. I was 16 or 17 years old. I couldn't go out and do anything. I didn't have any stuff on me or anything like that. And so I was like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm going to be stuck in this house for a couple days probably. And, how am I going to pass the time? And I was like, I got that PlayStation 2. Let me go ahead and bust that out and see, what the games I have are on it. And I ended up booting up Metal Gear Solid 2. And that's where my fandom started, because there was something about that game, the storytelling in the game, the way that the game played out, and just the game in general that really sort of drew me back into video games, because I was looking at it from kind of a different lens of storytelling with real world elements, storytelling with, things that are probably happening behind the scenes. If you've played it, Metal Gear Solid 2, you would know that it's a very political game, and, talking about things like the Patriots, the faceless people that actually run the country, and all this sort of stuff, conspiracy theories that probably aren't actual conspiracy theories, the flow of information, like things that are very realistic to talk about in 2023. But at the time of that game's release, like, it wasn't really seen as like a major thing. It was just seen as more of a plot for a video game. Of course, you have the game itself where you play a Snake and then you switch over to Raiden and stuff like that. Some people didn't really like it, but I thoroughly did. I enjoyed the little bit of a change there. Raiden was a very different character. Yes, he had his flaws, but that game was just special to me. The gameplay, the story, the graphics, the setting. I loved that game. And that game kind of shifted my mentality to get back into video games, a hobby that's a little bit healthier than, popping a handful of Xanax and shit like that. So I got back into video games because of that. I remember later on, I ended up picking up a GameCube and Metal Gear Solid The Twin Snakes, probably a month or so after that, because the GameCube was like $100. Because I wanted to play the first Metal Gear Solid game. It had been years since I have played it. I didn't really get to experience it myself. And of course, playing Twin Snakes, it's a bit of a controversial game in terms of what they did as far as the cutscenes are concerned. But the gameplay is still fantastic, although the Revolver Ocelot battle is a lot easier in Metal Gear Solid The Twin Snakes because of the first person perspective, whereas in the original game, you just had the top down perspective. But that's a topic for another video. It's actually a video I already made, so go watch that, talking about the controversy of Metal Gear Solid. But now I'm like balls deep into Metal Gear stuff. I'm like, Metal Gear is the shit. Like, this is awesome. I love this franchise. I want everything from this franchise. And I ended up becoming a collector of Metal Gear Solid stuff. I remember I got a fake cigarette case off of eBay from China that was like embroidered with a Metal Gear Solid logo on it, and I used to keep my cigarettes in there, and it had a lighter too, like one of those like Zippo style lighters and stuff. So like that was one of my crown jewels in my collection. I started buying all of the figures from Metal Gear Solid 1 and Metal Gear Solid 2. I ended up getting the whole collection. I remember the cabinets that I had at my apartment at the time, they had like a little bit of a gap between the ceiling, and I just lined them up around my apartment in the cabinets. I started buying like premium collector's editions. Obviously, all of this stuff wasn't being purchased all at one time. It was over a span of several months because I was a broke kid at that time. But I remember the build up and the lead up to Metal Gear Solid 3, and it was so big for me. I was absolutely obsessed with this game. I wanted everything from this game and then more. And so I remember we didn't have a video game store in our town. We had to travel about 40 minutes away to a town called Fayetteville, North Carolina. And I remember loading up the Explorer with two of my buddies and their two girlfriends, and we went, or one of their girlfriends, and we went to that GameStop for the early launch of the game. One of my friends was pretty drunk, and so I actually had him steal a poster off the wall from the GameStop of the Metal Gear Solid 3 thing, but the store was so packed that like there was no way that they were gonna find him. But I remember getting my copy of Metal Gear Solid 3 on launch, and I was just so excited for this shit. I was ready. I was waiting for this. We got back to my apartment, and they're like talking and shit, and I'm like, yo, y'all need to stop talking. I'm trying to play this game. I'm trying to follow the story. They would not shut up. So I ended up kicking out everyone. I was like, get the fuck out of here. Get out of my apartment. I need to play and enjoy this game. And I still think to this day that Metal Gear Solid 3 is the peak Metal Gear Solid game. Although it's a precursor to the story and stuff like that. You know, it's the big boss character. I still think it's amazing because of the fact that you learn, you know, once again, it's taking a real situation and making it into the game. So basing the story within reality, the characters that you end up coming across, you know, the boss herself and her gang of hooligans. And then of course you had Khrushchev, and then you have Raiden Kov and stuff like that. But like the gameplay of Metal Gear Solid 3, it was just so great. And it's a game that you could still play today, even if you played it like 20 times. And still probably find something new. The camo system was really cool because it would allow you to hide in different areas. You know, different areas had different levels of camo. So you would have to equip a certain level of camo in order to blend in, or else you would stick out like a sore thumb. So you were always trying to find the camo variations in there. Enemy AI was vastly improved in this game as well. If you took out like a food supply of an area, like the soldiers would be hungry when you came across them. You could throw down rotten food and they would get attracted to it, pick it up, eat it, and then get sick and then run off. You had to take care of Snake as well, or Big Boss, Naked Snake, we'll say. You know, if you got shot, you had to remove the bullets. If you fell from a large area, you had to put a splint on there. If you ate some bad food, you could make them throw up and stuff. It was just so cool. You know, some of the boss battles definitely missed in that game. You know, like the Fury boss battle, you know, but like the end was just so amazing. The end is still one of the greatest boss battles of all time. Trying to find this old man hiding in this vast wooded area with a sniper, and he's taking you out. Like, just so cool. The relationship between Snake and Eva and Snake and Boss and stuff like that. Like, a timeless game. Excellent storytelling. A lot of James Bond like elements into it. And at this point, now I'm in the peak of my fandom. You know, I'm buying, I remember I had a desk, and on that desk was just all Metal Gear crap. I didn't care about anything else. I didn't care about any other franchises. It was just, I mean, I played other franchises, but it was just Metal Gear Solid. That's all I wanted to collect for. That's all I wanted to talk about. That's all I gave a shit about. I was finding stuff from Japan, like rare stuff. Of course, then you had games like Acid come along and stuff, and it was like, you know, I don't like card games, but I forced myself to play those games. We ended up getting games on the PSP, like Portable Ops and stuff like that. I was all about those games. I remember Subsistence came out for Metal Gear Solid 3, which was like the re-release of the game with some new content, and it included the older MSX versions of the game. And so I had to play those because I wasn't able to get an MSX and import those games just to get, you know, that story from that time frame and stuff like that. I was just a die-hard collector. And then, of course, Metal Gear Solid 4 came along. And at this point, like, I'm pretty deep into my Metal Gear Solid fandom, but I didn't own a PS3. So I walked into a Best Buy because they had the bundle when that game came out. And I was like, y'all got credit cards here? I was like 22 or something like that. And they're like, yeah, we have store credit cards. I was like, I want to sign up for one. So I signed up for one. I didn't have a credit card at that time. And I remember they gave me a $2,000 limit. I was like, fuck yeah, let's go. So I bought the Metal Gear Solid 4 pack-in bundle PlayStation 3. And then once again, I know that there's people that don't like that game. You know, people think that Akiba is a horrible character because he's pooping on himself all the time. But I think Metal Gear Solid 4 was just such good fan service because you had so many revisiting characters. You had so many characters coming back, you know, reprising their roles or making cameos in the game, this, that, or the other. The ones that, of course, are alive. And it ties everything from the first 3 games together quite nicely. You see the degradation of Solid Snake, his broken down body, his mind starting to break as well because he's an old man, nano machines, all sorts of stuff. And I love this game. I know that there's people out there that they're not huge fans of it, and I can understand why. But if you were a Metal Gear Solid fan, you know, this was it for you. This was the continuation and potentially the conclusion of the story. And plus, much like Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence had, or Substance also had it as well, there was online play in this game. Now, Metal Gear Solid 3, Brett, you're not going to find footage for this. Metal Gear Solid 3's Substance online play was fun, but it was definitely very rigid. But Metal Gear Solid 4 was a hell of a lot better. I was in a clan called the Recon Unit. I was doing the tournaments and stuff like that. I was balls deep into that game. I loved everything about that game. And then, of course, you know, we started to get an oversaturation of stuff. We started to get side titles, more portable titles and stuff. And it felt like, to me, it honestly felt like an oversaturation of the franchise, and I started to fall out of love with it because I wasn't able to keep up with everything. I wasn't able to get, you know, the Japanese release alongside of the North American release. There was too much stuff. There was too many games coming out, too many projects that didn't really encompass what I loved about Metal Gear Solid 2 and by extension Metal Gear Solid 1. So I ended up selling off most of my Metal Gear Solid collection, just keeping the games and stuff like that. And then we got Metal Gear Solid 5. At the time, I absolutely hated that game. I hated the story direction. I understand, you know, it's doing this, that, or the other. I hated Kiefer Sutherland. It's like, where is David Hayter? This is ridiculous. Like, bring David Hayter back. And just the way that Konami and Kojima had a butting of heads. You know, I wasn't there in the room. We don't know the true story. We've only ever heard, you know, one side of the story. I'm sure it's not just, you know, poor Kojima, especially when you look at how eccentric of a person he is when it comes to game design nowadays. I mean, I'm sure Konami had some reasons behind their stuff. And I think from a gameplay perspective, it is a very good game. It's a game that you can enjoy. But for a Metal Gear Solid game, I don't know. It just didn't have the same pizzazz. It didn't have the same sort of feeling for me. And I think that's the big thing. It never gave me that sense of joy and bewilderment like the previous Metal Gear Solid games did. And so, you know, Metal Gear Solid 5, that was the last Metal Gear game that we got. And Konami's obviously a very different company than they were around the release of Metal Gear Solid 5. And I don't know that Metal Gear will ever come back as like a huge franchise in and of its own with like a new entry and stuff like that, with, you know, the head writer of the game no longer being a portion of it. But I don't even necessarily think that's a bad thing. You know, I would love a new Metal Gear Solid, but you would have to do it like so right in order for me to like give it my stamp of approval. And I know my stamp of approval doesn't mean a damn thing in the grand scheme of things, but you would really have to do it right. You would have to go back. You would have to bring in David Hayter, or it's like, are you going to bring in a new character? Then you're losing the pizzazz of Snake. You're going to have Kiefer Sutherland do it again, try to make this the new normal and stuff. Like, I don't know. So this collection to me, is going to be awesome. And I hope that there is subsequent follow-ups. You know, there's games like Portable Ops, there's games like Peace Walker that are stuck on the PSP that obviously have been brought over to modern platforms with HD versions, but like I would like to see those on the Switch too. Could we see Metal Gear Solid 4 possibly return in a volume 2? I mean, that's a game that's stuck on the PlayStation 3. Emulation on it can be pretty tricky, although I am the emulation king. So that's another game, you know, that I would love to see brought back, and maybe even bring back the online multiplayer. Like that online multiplayer in Metal Gear Solid 4 was just so unique because there were so many different, and really by extension, Metal Gear Solid 3 was unique as well, but Metal Gear Solid 4 played better. You know, it played a lot more like a more modern game, whereas, you know, Metal Gear Solid 3 Substance Online definitely had some jank to it, but it's still one of my favorite franchises of all time. Like I love Metal Gear Solid. You know, I even like 5 at this point in time. I like it. I don't love it, but I like it. You know, it's a good game. But those first 4 games in the mainline Solid trilogy are just amazing. If you've never played them before, obviously, you know, some of them have aged better than others. Metal Gear Solid 1 has aged, you know, not very gracefully like a lot of PS1 era games are. But if you're into emulation, you know, check out stuff like Duck Station that enhances all of the textures and stuff like that. The gameplay will still be a bit rigid for a lot of people, but it looks a hell of a lot better than what they're doing with the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection, especially on the Switch. 30 frames per second on everything. Come on, Konami, you suck. You suck. Like, how do you mess this up? You should have outsourced it to someone, given it to someone else. But that's a little bit of me rambling about the Metal Gear Solid collection for nearly 17 minutes. Let me know your thoughts on Metal Gear Solid games. Like, what were your favorite games? Did you like the weirdo game? I know a lot of people like Revengeance. That's like their favorite because it's a platinum game and it's a completely different Metal Gear experience. I've never liked it though. I don't think it's a bad game or anything like that. It's just, you know, it's Metal Gear in name and with Raiden, but it's not Metal Gear in terms of gameplay. Like that stealth gameplay, man. I miss that era of gaming where you had games like Metal Gear, you had games like Splinter Cell that were different. You know, they were a new genre essentially, and you don't really see that much in modern gaming anymore. It's just rehashing of current genres that we already have, which, you know, isn't necessarily a bad thing. You know, everyone's trying to perfect these genres, but it's like, what could you do that's actually new? You know, technical limitations have been gone for a little while now as far as creating a size and a scope of a game. I'm just rambling now. Let me shut up. But anyways, what do you think about Metal Gear Solid? What's your favorite Metal Gear Solid game or Metal Gear game? Maybe you're an MSX head or you like Snake's Revenge on the NES, which is not a real Metal Gear game. Let me know in the comment section down below. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and share. And as always, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Later.